Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to A Life Less Traveled. I'm your host, Michael Wentink. I'm 40 years old and live in San Antonio, Texas with my wife and two beautiful children. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis about 10 years ago, and I write about my journey of living with MS, and you can check that out on my website at mjwentink.com. That's mjwentink.com. I share some of my writings with the National MS Society, and they post it up on their blog at the msconnection.org, and you can also read them at themighty.com. If you happen to be on Twitter, you can look me up there at mjwentink. Again, that's at mjwentink. Please feel free to shoot me a tweet. I would absolutely love to connect. Today, on the 5th episode of A Life Less Traveled, we're going to be discussing brain fog and what that means for a person living with multiple sclerosis. Before we start up with brain fog, I just wanted to discuss I've been sick, really sick over the past week. I got a really bad cold. It's one of those colds that kind of worked its way through the family, but it ended up sticking on me for a while. And so, I was lying down in bed a lot. I was on the couch a lot, and so I had a lot of time to think over the past week or so. And I was thinking about, living with MS is hard enough, all the things that are going on. But, I don't want to say I've gotten used to living with MS because, that's kind of a terrible way of putting it. But you adjust. Life goes on. It's like I know I can't stand on my left leg for a certain amount of time without it being excruciating amounts of pain. So, when I go out somewhere, if I'm with the family or, if my wife and I go on a date or something, it's like we know that we're going to avoid situations where I'm kind of just stuck standing there with nothing else. I'd almost rather be moving than standing. And, and there's other, obviously issues that you're dealing with MS, but you adjust and you deal with those sort of things on a day by day basis. Sometimes you wake up and it's something new. Oh, okay, my left hand isn't working today. I'm gonna adjust and you gotta keep on living life, But when I got the cold, and I'm lying there, I'm thinking about why has this knocked me out so bad? It was so difficult living with this. Like, I already have MS. Why is this so hard? And I guess maybe that's the reason is that, my body's in my mind is already dealing with so much to kind of, make it through each day of living with MS, where it's like when you pile something else on, whether it be a cold, and, it was a pretty bad cold. There was no fever involved, but, there was a lot of sneezing and runny nose and, my head was basically pounding the entire week, and and so there's a lot of stuff like that involved. But it's like you pile that on top of MS, and I think my body just broke down, and I couldn't move. So, I thought that was just kind of an interesting scenario. I don't know if that happens to a lot of other people that are living with MS too, or it's like, why did that? It's like everyone else in the family is a 24-hour cold. They get it and they're bouncing back. But me, there's no bouncing back. So, but today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about brain fog and what that means for folks that are living with MS. And for me, there's a lot of different ways that brain fog has, changed my life and changed the way that I live. The WebMD, definition, or the medical definition of brain fog, if you will, it includes forgetfulness and trouble concentrating and confusion, solving problems more slowly, forgetting appointments. I lose track of conversations. I mean, I'm going through, this is, the medical definition of it, and all these things so far, this is exactly what my, life is like, needing the constant reminders about daily tasks and things. And I guess the issue that happens is that, it's a breakdown of my brain cells in the blood vessels that provide the nutrients that help them work. So that makes it harder for my brain to do its job. And so, I guess brain fog is the best term that they, would come up with. And it is like you're in a fog. I've remembered, issues happening for a while now. And at first, it's one of those things where it's like, well, maybe I'm just, getting older. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people think that. It's like, you misplace keys, right? You can never find where your keys are. When you're 16 and 17 years old, it's like your parents are always forgetting where their keys are or something like that. It's not necessarily happening to a 16, 17-year-old. And so it's like maybe these things are happening. But, for my situation, it's a lot more of extreme example. It's not necessarily about forgetting my keys or something like that. It's just forgetting where I am. Not who I am, but where I am. Growing up, I was pretty proud of my attention to detail with directions and getting around, especially where I grew up in the Northern Virginia area. There's a lot of traffic involved, so you're always sitting in traffic, driving somewhere, and so going to and from work, you'd always be looking for shortcuts. You want to avoid the highway at all costs. And you're going through shortcuts to all these different neighborhoods, and then maybe when school's in session, you're going to be taking a different route. And I mean, because you need to avoid the buses and the implications of that on traffic. And, I'm making, 30 different turns, just going, like 5 miles from my apartment to work when, I was growing up and living there in Northern Virginia. And it's just the amount that I'm able to remember, or I was able to remember. And I don't know when it started for me. I feel like it was after we came to Texas, at least, where my ability to have recall of getting from point A to point B, it's not like it slowly dwindled away. It just went away. And I remember thinking when we moved here in 2003, full 5 years before I was diagnosed, I remember thinking, I wasn't able to, get around places easier. And I would tell my wife, or I'd tell people that I'd meet here, it's like, the first, 25 years of my life, 28 years of my life, I was remembering so much with traffic. And now I'm in San Antonio and traffic isn't as bad. Maybe it's almost like I was on vacation from learning directions and getting around places. It was a rationalization, that I was thinking. But the reality is that, I would just, forget, okay, now how do I get to the grocery store again? I mean, that's literally the issue that occurs when I'm driving around to different places. I mean, there's one main grocery store that I probably know how to get to a lot, but maybe it's going to a restaurant we've been to before, or something like that. So many times I just have to say to my wife, now where were we going again? And things like that are pretty routine. And so for the reason I'm giving that example is that this is a strong case of like a before and after, the brain fog that entered my life, where, it's not like I was terrible with directions growing up. I mean, this was something that I was really, really, good at. And I almost had to excel at to survive in Northern Virginia. But now, it's just something that just isn't there anymore. And I have, a few more examples I'll be discussing with that in a little bit. But the one other clear-cut change in my kind of capacity to remember things is when I was younger, my friends, they'd often say to me, it's like, you need to have like your own sports show, because you're just able to, recite these sports facts just constantly. And they were right. I loved, statistics and just remembering sports things. It's not like I was intending to remember them. It was just something that was just always there. I was able to pull from and relate to. I love numbers and I love sports. And so the two kind of just went hand in hand. So I'd always be able to remember things. But, but in today's world, and I'm living in now, I can remember, stuff, from like the Redskins 1991 season. A lot of that stuff is, I call it, like a lockbox of my memories, that they're there. But, in terms of things that have happened over like the past 10 years or really even the past year as it relates to sports, or last week as it relates to sports, there's just no recall there anymore. I can't remember, players oftentimes, or maybe what happened. I have to go check it out to remember again. But that's another kind of clear example of, this isn't something where it's like, oh, I've gotten a little older and I can't recite every single, sports score from last night anymore. Yeah, that happens, right? Life happens. You're in a career and maybe you're not able to remember as much because you're not studying sports scores all day, or maybe you've just gotten older and so maybe things are kind of slipping through. But for me, it's just like, it went from being able to remember so much to just being able to remember absolutely nothing. And that's, it's been a hard adjustment when I look at something like, doing fantasy football or any sort of fantasy sports. Honestly, I don't bother with them anymore because it's kind of hard for me to remember all that's involved with it. Remembering players, where they're at, and, setting the lineup. It's really, it's too much. And so that's something that I don't do. But, it's something that I'm well aware of. Here are two things where my sense of direction and being able to recall sports stuff, and it's not there anymore. Another, in terms of my sense of direction, I'd mentioned, okay, so I have a hard time getting around, driving around. Like, I know how to drive. I don't have any issues with that, where it's like, how do I drive again? How do I put the car in drive? Do I press on the accelerator? Like, I know that. But, getting from point A to point B, that can be a little tricky. But it's not even just driving. There's been numerous times where maybe my wife and I, we go out to a restaurant and we're on a date, and we're sitting there and we're eating, and I say, okay, hey, I need to go use the restroom. I'll be right back. And she's like, okay. And I go and use the restroom, and as I'm leaving and I'm starting to I walk out, and I'm like, where are we sitting? I have absolutely no memory. My mind just goes completely blank. I have no idea. Like, I can't even begin to recall. Like, I'm thinking of landmarks in my head, a table that we were near. Maybe it was like loud people were there that I remember, or someone that I know that was there, or maybe it's anything I'm trying to recall, and it's not there. And it's like this cold sweat always starts to like form when I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea where I am right now. And I don't know how to get back to our seat. On a few occasions, I've actually had to call my wife on her cell phone to kind of help her direct me back to the seat we were sitting at. There was another occasion, this happened a few years ago, where I was meeting a friend that I used to work with, and I was meeting him for lunch. And so we were going to meet up at this restaurant that we used to eat at while we were working together. And he was still working at the company I was at, but so I was like, okay, well, I'll meet you there. And we gave a time, and he was driving there from work, and I was driving there from home. And so I'm in my car, and I arrive at the restaurant, and I was stunned because it was closed down. It was no longer in business. It had been replaced by like another restaurant. And I was like, wow, I mean, this is crazy. So, I texted my buddy. I was parked there in front of the restaurant. I texted him, and I was like, hey, the restaurant is closed down. We got to go somewhere else. Maybe we try out this new place that's been replaced with. And immediately my friend Jason called me, and he's like, Mike, there's no way that the restaurant is closed down because I'm parked in front of it right now. and there it is again. The cold sweat just starts to form as this like nervous feeling overtakes my body. Where I'm like, where am I? What is going on? I had no idea where I was. In my head, I thought I knew where I was, but then once I realized that I didn't, I just I thankfully there's Google Maps, and I was able to kind of find my way with that. But I mean, this is a restaurant I'd been to numerous times while working at my previous employer, and it's just I wasn't able to remember where it was. So, speaking of my employer and my final few years of working there, there was one thing I remember. There was this there was the president of the bank at the time. We were having a meeting, and and he's talking to folks there, and people were kind of bringing up issues or presenting a lot of different issues, and out of nowhere he just he stuck up his hand, his 5 fingers, and he was just like, 5 things. I can only remember 5 things at one time. And it was kind of funny. He was saying it with a smile, where it was kind of in a joking way, but there was a lot of truth to that, where it's not that he can only remember 5 things at one time. It's almost like, let's focus on the 5 most important things that are out there, right? Because as when you're working at a big company, there's always thousands of issues going on, and within a specific area, there could be dozens of issues that to take over your day. But he was saying just 5 things. And so for me, I've kind of taken that as my own little mantra. I'm not using it the same sort of way as he was, but in many ways I actually am, where it's like I need to just focus on what's in front of me, and and not worry about what I may or may not forget. I just need to focus on what's in front of me, and usually 5, that sounds like a pretty good number to me in terms of things that I'm going to remember. And while I was there working still at the company, trying to remember things was hard. The position I was at, maybe is obviously you get calendar reminders for meetings that you have to go to, and I'd put little notes in what the meeting's going to be about. Sometimes they send out agendas, but I'd always kind of like add my own additional agenda. So, I'm showing up at this meeting and I'm ready to discuss what's going on. But I started blind copying myself on literally every email that I sent out. Like every single email, I was blind copying myself, because that way I was going to remember that I sent that email. Maybe we needed some information in our area, and we were waiting on someone to provide us some graphs or some month-end information, and So I'd send them a note and be like, hey, when do you think we're going to get this stuff by? Do you think we can get it by next week? I'm blind copying myself because I wanted to remember that I sent that email. Sometimes people get busy and they're not able to respond as quickly. And that's something I wanted to be able to keep track of. And a lot of the folks I was working with, my coworkers, they were unaware at the time of my mental struggles. This was probably, before and after I was diagnosed with MS that I was doing this. So they might have been aware, they knew I was, had MS and stuff that was going on with that, but they didn't know how it was impacting my, mental issues. I didn't want to discuss that at work. That's not something that I wanted to, hinder maybe, my future within the company and my development and where I was going. But what they were, so since they were unaware of that and they didn't know I was blind copying myself on everything, they were always like surprised that I had like this seemingly like this endless database of communications that I had. And so, they were almost impressed, where they thought I was like meticulous with my communication, and it wasn't intended that way. I was doing it that way because I knew that was the only way I'd be able to remember things. But it was certainly an example of meet lemonade. So, it's like I'm not able to remember things. I'm not going around broadcasting that I can't remember things, but I'm going to make an adjustment in my life. Things that I wouldn't do before, that I wouldn't have blind copy myself on, I'm going to do that. And then, so number one, I'm able to remember. And then number two, my coworkers, they're like, wow, this guy, he keeps track of things and he knows what's going on. So, it's kind of amusing as I think back on that and how people were thinking that that's why I was, I was just meticulous, but really I was just trying to remember things. Talking about work, though, that's, discussing the professional impacts that it had, but there's obviously plenty of personal impacts that this has. Yes, sometimes I'm not able to remember how to get, back to the table from the restroom, and, I've gone to the grocery store with my children, and they've helped remind me where I'm parked, because that's, a pretty common occurrence. But, it goes much further than that as well. When I'm having conversations with people, and even within this podcast, I often have a difficult time trying to find the right words to say. I know a dog is called a dog, but in terms of, maybe describing how the dog looks or how fast it might be moving, using those adjectives or their descriptors, I'm not able to remember the words that I want to be using. So it's like in my mind, I'm scrolling through, okay, I can't remember this word, so that dog's fast. That's all I got. I can't give you any more than that. And, when I'm conversing with others, I know that I'll be telling them a story and I'm thinking in my head, I'm pretty sure I've already told this to them. If it wasn't yesterday, it may even been 5 minutes ago that I was telling them this exact same story. So for any of you that are out there that have done that, I apologize. And I worry that, I come across as, aloof, or maybe uncaring, or just someone that's not a good friend. And that's the worry that I have from this thing. I have sticky notes everywhere trying to remind myself of things that I need to do, or phone calls that I need to return. And it's a hard way to keep your personal connections going, because it's like, yeah, I forgot about you. It's like, you're not going to say that to someone, because it's like that's not something where it's like, I forgot that I should have been calling you back or something like that. But it's just, I can't remember so many different things. It's 5 things at one time, and I struggle with that. My wife and I maybe were going out to meet up with some friends or something like that, and oftentimes, like, before we arrive at our destination, I kind of I'll be like, hey, can we go through things, the the names of their kiddos again, and or maybe things that have happened to them recently that I should be remembering, that I should be aware of. There's frustration in my tone there because I want to be able to remember these things that I should be remembering. It goes back to those 5 different things where it's like, I need that reminder. I need to be able to have that in my head at that moment. Otherwise it's just going to be fleeting and I'm not going to be able to remember it. But one thing that I have tried is like, well, how do you counter brain fog? And, part of it is, you're laughing it off. Because sometimes there's just nothing else that you can do. I make sticky notes a lot, and I set reminders and through my phone, through my computer, through Alexa, our Amazon Alexa, setting reminders through her. So obviously a lot of that stuff's going on. But another thing that I've tried to do over the past few years, since I'm no longer working, is continue to really challenge my mind, and I do that through right now jigsaw puzzles. I may not be working anymore and going into work and challenging my mind that way, but in terms of puzzles, and I do a lot of games, maybe on the computer that I have, and there's some games that are involved that in terms of trivia and remembering things, and that helps a lot. But I feel like jigsaw puzzles has really been something that's helped me a lot. I'm sitting down, it's just me and those little puzzle pieces there, and it's working on putting them together, and it's working on pushing myself to challenge my mind. And I'm not saying that it's helped me remember things any better, or it's improved my brain fog in any way that I can observe, but I feel like it's been a good way to I may not be in the professional world anymore, but I'm still at home and I'm here and I'm trying to challenge my mind in many different ways. Whether you are working and you're working 50 hours a week, 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, life is still is too precious to worry about things that you can't control. And sometimes while you're stressing over the little minor potholes that life throws your way each day, you lose sight of those 5 things that truly should matter. Because really, that's when it comes down to it, there are just 5 special things that probably really do matter each day. And so in a way, I look at as, here's another silver lining in my life of living with MS. It's helped me truly focus on the things that really do matter. It's out of fear of not being able to remember things that I'm able to, get down to those 5 things. I really hope that you enjoyed my 5th episode of A Life Less Traveled, and you come back and listen to my next one. You can check me out on my website at mjwentink.com. Again, that's mjwentink.com, or on Twitter at mjwentink. Send me a tweet. Talk about MS. We can talk about the 5 things. We can talk about anything you'd like. I hope to hear from you. Hope you all have a fantastic day.